Hello everyone, welcome to Mind Podcast Buddhism. Today we will talk about the topic, understanding the mind in Buddhism. In this episode, we will explore the duality of body and mind, delve into how Buddhism defines and interprets the mind, and discuss its significance in achieving enlightenment and liberation. Stay tuned for an insightful journey into the depths of Buddhist philosophy. Understanding the mind in Buddhism. Humans are described as comprising two parts, body and mind. In Buddhist terminology, the body, i.e. the human physical form, is called rupa, while the mind is nama, which means spirit or consciousness. The body is material, visible, and tangible, but the mind is not. So where is the mind in the human body? The ancients believed that the mind resided in the heart. Today, science suggests that the mind originates from the brain, where the central nervous system operates and controls the entire body. The mind is differentiated into three mechanisms: the cognitive mind, which thinks, calculates, and reasons, often reflecting on past events and corresponding to the Buddhist concept of mano in Pali; the conceptual mind, which envisions future images, adjacent to the cognitive mind, called citta in Pali; and the discriminative mind or consciousness, located at the front of the right cerebral hemisphere, referred to as vijnana in Pali. These divisions exist, but when speaking of one, we refer to all three collectively as the mind. When asked what the mind is and how to perceive it, scholars explain that the mind encompasses thoughts, judgments, doubts, disappointments, sorrows, love, longing, jealousy, etc. These abstract mental elements are invisible, but one can sense the mind through the actions and words of the body, indicating the mind's presence. For example, when a person is angry, their voice may be rough and loud, possibly swearing at the opponent. Their actions may be rude, involving hitting and breaking objects. Depending on the intensity of these actions and words, we can gauge the level of anger in that person's mind. Conversely, when the same person speaks softly, behaves gently, and has kind eyes, these images reveal that their mind is balanced and peaceful. Thus, although we cannot see the mind, it clearly governs and directs a person's entire life. It causes moments of happiness and suffering. Over time, many psychologists, philosophers, and religious researchers have commented on the mind. This article aims to briefly explore the mind in Buddhism to apply it to the practice of attaining enlightenment and liberation. Understanding the mind in Theravada Buddhism. As a great enlightened being, the Buddha recognized that everyone suffers. Suffering is a truth. Having a body means suffering, and this suffering arises from the human mind. To eliminate suffering, we must first understand when the mind brings happiness and when it causes sorrow. This means understanding what the mind is and how it functions. In the Dhammapada, the twin verses, the Buddha confirms that the mind is the master, the mind directs, and the mind creates actions. If a person acts or speaks under the influence of a tainted mind, suffering will follow them like a cart follows the ox's hoof, inescapably. Conversely, if they speak or act with a pure mind, happiness will follow them like a shadow that never leaves. The verses state: 1. Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind-wrought. If with an impure mind a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. 2. Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind-wrought. If with a pure mind a person speaks or acts, happiness follows him like his never-departing shadow. Thus, the mind manifests in different states, primarily categorized into two types. The mind that causes suffering is likened to a muddy pond, an impure mind, the mind of an ordinary person. The mind that brings happiness is likened to a clear pond, the pure mind of a sage. According to Buddhism, humans are composed of 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, collectively called nama-rupa. Form is material and lacks awareness. Awareness in Buddhism, as taught by the Buddha, is the awareness of the mind, which includes feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Awareness in Buddhism is called vijnana, which is the awareness or discernment of the 6 senses when they interact with the 6 sense objects, giving rise to eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. When the senses interact with objects and awareness arises, this is the knowing mind, also called consciousness. When the mind thinks and plans, this is the mental formations. When it recalls past memories or imagines future images, this is perception. When feelings of joy, sorrow, pleasure, or pain arise, this is the feeling mind. The feeling mind has two types: physical sensations, cold, heat, pain, called body feelings, and emotional sensations, joy, sorrow, pleasure, pain, called mental feelings. These four aspects of awareness, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, are collectively the mind, or more accurately, the four functions of the mind. Understanding the mind, according to Abhidhamma, according to the Abhidhamma, or higher teaching, the mind is defined as awareness or knowing of the object, sense object. This awareness is merely knowing, without distinguishing between good and bad, liking or disliking. When there is comparison and discrimination, the ego is involved. A special feature of the Abhidhamma is the description of the process of the mind, i.e., the sequence of arising and ceasing of a mental stream. The mind is described as a continuous stream of 89 mental states and 52 mental factors, arising and ceasing in succession. These mental states are classified into four categories based on the realm: sense sphere consciousness, form sphere consciousness, formless sphere consciousness, and supermundane consciousness, which transcends the three realms. The Abhidhamma provides a detailed analysis of the mind on both physical and psychological aspects, known as Buddhist psychology. Due to the complexity, this article only briefly introduces the concept of mind and its functions as human awareness. Understanding the mind, according to Yogacara, consciousness-only school. Yogacara, or consciousness only, is also a branch of Buddhist psychology, but it belongs to Mahayana Buddhism, which emerged about 9 centuries after the Buddha's passing. In northern India, two Brahmin brothers, Asanga and Vasubandhu, became monks and attained arhatship. According to legend, Asanga used his supernatural powers to ascend to the Tushita heaven to learn Yogacara from Bodhisattva Maitreya. He would listen at night and teach the public during the day. Vasubandhu, initially a Hinayana practitioner, later followed his brother's advice and converted to Mahayana. He authored many treatises on Yogacara, such as the 100 Dharmas, 20 verses on consciousness only, and 30 verses on consciousness only. Asanga and Vasubandhu are regarded as the founders of the Yogacara school in India. In the 7th century, during the Tang dynasty, the Chinese monk Xuanzang traveled to India to study the Yogacara school at Nalanda Monastery under the guidance of the master Shilabhadra. Upon returning to China, he propagated the Yogacara teachings and authored 2 treatises, The Establishment of the Doctrine of Consciousness Only and Verses on the 8 Consciousnesses. Xuanzang is considered the founder of the Chinese Yogacara school. Yogacara divides the mind into 8 consciousnesses and 51 mental factors. The term mind here is synonymous with consciousness. The 8 consciousnesses are eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mental consciousness, manas consciousness, and alaya consciousness. The first 6 consciousnesses correspond to the 6 senses. Yogacara distinguishes the mental base as a faculty or sense organ, also called manas consciousness. Mental consciousness arises based on the mental base, which in turn relies on alaya consciousness, the fundamental consciousness. When images pass through the 6 sense doors, they generate the 6 types of consciousness. The mental base itself is considered a consciousness, i.e. manas consciousness. Understanding a bit about alaya, manas, and mental consciousness in the Yogacara school. 1. Alaya consciousness, also known as store consciousness, has 3 meanings. A. The storing function. This consciousness acts as a storehouse, retaining and preserving the seeds of all phenomena, irrespective of whether they are good or bad. B. The stored function. This consciousness is influenced and affected by the seeds it contains. C. The self-attachment function. This consciousness is clung to by manas, which attaches to it as the self. It serves as the basis for the arising of the other 7 consciousnesses. Hence it is also called the fundamental consciousness. It is vast and deep, containing all the karmic seeds within the stream of consciousness. Its nature is neither wholesome nor unwholesome, but it contains both wholesome and unwholesome seeds. As long as it holds defiled seeds, it is grasped by manas as the self. When all seeds become pure, it is called the immaculate consciousness or the great mirror wisdom. In other words, it becomes the Tathagata Garbha, the Buddha or Dharma body. According to Yogacara, the mind is called consciousness, vijnana, when it is still defiled and clings to self and phenomena. When the mind is completely pure and selfless, it is called wisdom, jnana. 2. Man is consciousness, or mental base. This is the basis for the arising of mental consciousness, just as the eye is the basis for the arising of eye consciousness, and the ear is the basis for the arising of ear consciousness. Manas arises from the ignorant seeds of alaya, and its nature is to grasp the self. It clings to alaya as the self. All self-related attachments, such as self-delusion, self-love, self-view, and self-conceit, originate from it. The self-attachment of manas is innate self-attachment, which arises simultaneously with life. This self-attachment existed before birth, so manas does not need the 5 aggregates to grasp the self. It arises from alaya and already clings to alaya as the self. 3. Mental consciousness. When the mental base contacts mental objects, it generates awareness, called mental consciousness. Mental consciousness has 3 forms of awareness. A. Direct awareness. Immediate, impartial awareness without discrimination. Inferential awareness. Awareness through discrimination and comparison. C. Erroneous awareness. When the first 2 forms of awareness misrepresent reality, it is called erroneous awareness. For example, mistaking a rope for a snake in the dark. Mental consciousness can be interrupted and cease to function in 5 cases. 1. In the realm of non-perception. 2. In the cessation of perception and feeling. 3. In non-perception concentration. 4. In dreamless sleep. 5. In unconsciousness. Outside these cases, mental consciousness continuously operates even during sleep. In summary, according to Yogacara, the mind is consciousness, the knowing that includes the 6 consciousnesses as understood in Theravada Buddhism, and adds 2 new consciousnesses, manas and alaya. Buddhist scholars believe that the concept of alaya consciousness as the fundamental consciousness is reasonable, complementing the traditional view that consciousness arises from the interaction of the 6 senses with their respective objects. For example, eye consciousness arises when the eye contacts a visual object. Thus, consciousness is merely the product of the senses and their objects. The scholars explain, in the 12 links of dependent origination, ignorance conditions formations, formations condition consciousness, consciousness conditions name and form. The consciousness here is precisely alaya, the stream of karmic consciousness accumulated from many lifetimes. From alaya consciousness arises name and form and the 5 aggregates, which include the 6 senses. The mind in Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism advocates direct pointing to the mind, seeing one's nature to become a Buddha, which means directly pointing to the human mind to realize one's true nature and become a Buddha. The human mind has many natures, such as greed, anger, delusion, arrogance, doubt, virtue, and vice. These types of mind belong to the ordinary mind. The nature that Zen Buddhism refers to is not the ordinary nature of those who do not practice Zen, but the enlightened nature. Realizing the mind, seeing the original enlightenment, and living with the enlightened nature is the meaning of seeing the nature in Zen Buddhism. Enlightened nature. Enlightened nature simply means the nature of knowing, called buddhi in Sanskrit, meaning the faculty of knowing. Enlightened nature has 2 meanings. The first meaning of enlightened nature, buddhi, is the innate wisdom of human beings. It has the capacity to know objects clearly without being influenced by them, belonging to the mind of a sate. Conversely, the second meaning of buddhi is intellectual sharpness. With intellectual sharpness, it is influenced by objects belonging to the worldly mind. Both types of wisdom are described by the term buddhi in the Indian language, leading to confusion. One can distinguish between the states of verbal and non-verbal knowledge of buddhi. If verbal, it is intellectual sharpness. If non-verbal, it is innate wisdom. With the wisdom of sates, buddhi, or enlightened nature, fundamentally refers to non-verbal knowledge and non-verbal awareness. In Zen terminology, enlightened nature is the non-verbal knowing, simultaneous and instantaneous. Whether with or without information, it still knows. It is a continuous, silent stream of knowing, uninterrupted, without discriminative mind, without forming concepts in the brain, only concise analysis and non-verbal awareness. It has no afflictions, no images of competition, conflict, struggle, like the mental consciousness and mental base. It has no reasoning, speculation, or should be, must be, like intellectual sharpness. It perceives things as they are, seeing the suchness of things. Prejudices, biases, and subjectivity do not exist in it. Therefore, it is unaffected by objects, non-attached, and independent. It does not follow or change with circumstances. When it is present, ignorance is absent, self is absent, afflictions are absent, habitual tendencies are absent. In all postures, it continuously absorbs external and internal objects, comprehending all while the mind remains unmoved. In Zen terminology, it is called the Master. Developed Buddhism calls it true self. In Theravada Buddhism, it is considered the knowing of one entering the stream of sates. The Buddha calls it the unborn. Yogacara calls it the immaculate consciousness. Zen masters liken it to a precious pearl, or a bright mirror, or vast like space. Enlightened nature includes three: the seeing nature of the eye, the hearing nature of the ear, the touching nature of the nose, tongue, and body. In summary, enlightened nature is the knowing of the true mind, deluded mind and true mind. One deluded mind, the mind of those who do not practice, is filled with various mental states. Sometimes it dwells on past events, sometimes it imagines future scenarios. In the present, it wanders from one thought to another. Sometimes it thinks good thoughts, sometimes it thinks harmful thoughts for personal gain. It experiences happiness and suffering. Generally, this mind is bound by greed, anger, delusion, arrogance, doubt, and wrong views, known in Buddhism as fetters, defilements, or habitual tendencies. If not driven by the six sense objects, form, smell, taste, touch, and mental objects, affecting emotional responses like love, hate, animosity, it is driven by the five desires: wealth, sensual pleasure, fame, and sleep, serving the ego. If gained, it is happy. If lost, it is sad. The Buddha likens this mind to a muddy pond, calling it the ordinary mind, or the mind of birth and death. Zen masters call this mind the deluded mind. 2. True mind. Unlike the deluded mind, the true mind silently knows without words. Its knowing is true, accurate, not tainted by the past, present, or future lenses. When the six senses contact the six sense objects, it perceives them as they are, seeing the suchness of the objects. It does not compare, criticize, or comment. The mental base, mental consciousness, or intellectual sharpness, i.e. the self, is absent in this mind. Silently knowing, it remains calm and free amidst all circumstances of prosperity and decline, union and separation, beauty and ugliness, gain and loss. The true mind is characterized by tranquility, purity, and clarity. The Buddha likens it to a clear pond, the mind of non-birth. Zen masters call it the true mind, or enlightened nature. Summary. In general, the mind is knowing, awareness, the nature of knowing. The mind leads all phenomena. A tainted mind, clinging to self and phenomena, greedy and selfish, is the root of birth and death, the deluded mind. When the mind is freed from the five hindrances, sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry and doubt, the tainted mind becomes pure and boundless, the foundation of enlightenment and liberation, called the true mind. In summary, the tainted mind is suffering, the pure mind is nirvana. The deluded mind is sentient beings, the enlightened mind is Buddha. The mind in Buddhism is explained in great detail depending on the Buddhist schools. This article aims to provide beginners with an understanding of what the mind is when it is called deluded and when it is called true, to facilitate practice, purify the body and mind, and aim for enlightenment and liberation.